Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jason Grant. I'm going to be your host today for Wireless Friday. And I want to be the first to thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your Friday afternoon. For some of you, your Friday evening. If it is some other time, then I very much, like morning, I very much appreciate you joining. I am recording the session today, so for those of your colleagues who were not able to make it today, we'll try to get the recording out to you. This is an event that my group runs, and we do it, I don't know, irregularly, maybe once a month, and we try to pick a topic that seems to be relevant and good for us. We picked a topic that seems to be very relevant. We had record registrations, and already we're seeing scores of people already signed in. So thanks again for your time. For those of you who don't know me, again, my name is Jason Grant. I'm a wireless specialist or an enterprise networking specialist here at Cisco. I've been with Cisco for about 15 years. I'm actually 16 years now. I'm here with a bunch of my colleagues. They're going to stay on mute, but they're going to be panelists available to answer questions for you. So what I want to do is I want to just kind of walk you through the WebEx Event Center. If you have not used WebEx Event Center, it may be a little bit different. Excuse my voice there. It may be a little bit different than what you've seen in the past. There's a couple of things you need to know. Everybody, oh, there's my voice again. Sorry about that. That was recorded. Everybody is muted. At the end of the session, we may get a little bit of time to kind of unmute everyone so that we can get some kind of live questions. However, along the way, there is a Q&A panel. So there's a little kind of question mark on the top right of your screen. It kind of looks like that. It should open up something on the lower left-hand corner of the screen that says Q&A. You can just ask all panelists. It's probably the best thing to do, and then someone will pick that question up and get it answered for you. Today, I would like to, and then also, if you are having any problems seeing or obviously hearing, you're not going to be able to hear me, can you hear me? But if you're having any problems seeing, just chat to me. I'm Jason Grant, or you can chat to all the panelists, and we'll try and help resolve any problems you have. So with that, I'd like to introduce today's special guest speaker. Robert Roulhac is a virtual systems engineer here at Cisco, and he is a subject matter expert on ISE, but I promised him that I wouldn't tell you guys that because when you tell someone you're a subject matter expert on ISE, all of a sudden you start getting a billion calls. So I'm not going to tell you that, but just he's really smart on that. So with that, Robert, you ready to go? Robert.
I am. Thank you for not saying what you said you wouldn't say.
Right. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to let you start sharing, and we'll just get started.
All righty. It's going to hand me the ball. There we go.
Done. You should have it now. Perfect.
All righty. And you all should be seeing my PowerPoint there.
Indeed, and it looks great.
Great. All right. Well, yes, my name is Robert Roulhac. I'm excited to be with you all today, excited to talk to you about ISE and guest access and what that means. Hoping that the content that I provide is relevant. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand as Jason has explained how to do so. There's questions that I need to address during the PowerPoint. I'll do my best to do that. And then we're going to have a brief PowerPoint, about 7 slides here, where we'll go through ISE and guest access. And I'll give you a little bit of a sneak preview on some things coming in ISE 2.2. And then also after that, we'll have a live demo where we'll actually get into the web interface, the GUI of ISE. I'll show you kind of the guest flow, what it looks like for the user, the end user, to connect to an environment and get guest access, as well as BYOD, employee bringing their own personal device and then getting access to the corporate environment. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask those questions as we go throughout the presentation. So ISE, what is ISE? ISE is a AAA server. It's authentication, authorization, and then accounting. Those are the three things that ISE is going to accomplish. We're going to determine who the user is, are their credentials correct, and then we're going to determine if their credentials are correct, how much access we want to give them in the authorization piece. And then after we do that, with the accounting piece, we want to be able to keep a record of who we've allowed to access the environment and what time they connected, what time they disconnected, and what they've done while they're in our environment. So that's what ISE is.
Excuse me, Robert. I don't mean to stop your flow here, but if you could, is there any chance that you can just go a tiny little bit closer to your microphone?
I sure can.
Yeah, that would be spectacular if you could.
All right, is that better?
Yeah, it sounds better to me. Yeah, do another sound check.
All right. Yep. So.
Yep, that sounds clear. Thank you for that.
One more time. Is that even better there?
Even better. Yes, thanks.
Great. So ISE as a authentication, authorization, and accounting server, it sits at your network door, and it really basically every user and every device that tries to connect to your environment, ISE is going to determine who that user is, what they're trying to connect to, what time of day it is they're trying to connect, where they're trying to connect from, what type of device they're using, and if the device that they're using is actually a compliant device, meaning it has the necessary antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-malware, or a regex entry or a watermark file on that device. And if it does, then we're going to be able to take that contextual information that we learned and then make an intelligent decision based on the roles and the policies that we put in place within ISE. So we'll have predefined intelligent policies that say, based on what we know about this device, based on what we know about this user, we want to give them this level of access. And then once we give them that access, we're going to make sure they have segmented access. And that segmented access really just allows for us to make sure that users that connect, they get access to things that they need to have access to and no access to things that they're not supposed to have access to. So when we think about what this means for guests, ISE is amazing in that in most network access control systems, there's network access control for your wired, your wireless, and then there's network access control for your guest environment. The beautiful thing about ISE is we control all of that from one place, reusing many of the same policy elements in order to be sure that we provide a seamless experience for your wireless users, your guest users that are using wireless, as well as your guest users that are using a wired connection. So when we think about guest access, we think about a couple of things. One, guest users have to have a guest account in some way, shape, or form, right? Guest users have to get their account credentials in some way, shape, or form. And then guest users have a custom portal that they may connect to, they may see when they first connect. We want to be able to provide multiple ways for guest users to connect. So when we think about all of that, we think about ISE having three main types of guest access. The first is hotspot guest access. This is what you would see in your Starbucks or your auto mechanic shop, where you connect to an SSID, there's no credentials at all, you type in some sort of internet code, and then you automatically get access to the internet. The next is your self-sponsored access flow. So this is what you may see when you log into a hotspot at your doctor's office, or where you're actually entering your name, your email address or your phone number, and then your information is sent off to a sponsor, a receptionist maybe, or someone within the organization, and then they actually approve your guest access. That could come with a sponsor, or it could come without a sponsor. The final way is the full sponsor guest access, where you actually create your account, or an account is created for you. Those credentials are prepared beforehand and then sent to you, and with those credentials, you're able to log into the environment. Those are the three main types. In that, we're going to show you one of those types today and talk about the other two. Another interesting thing is with ISE, the question that we often get is, how do guest users get their information? Well, with ISE, we try to provide a very flexible way of providing that guest information to your guests that may be coming into your environment. So one easy, simple way most solutions do it is email. The second is being able to print it right from ISE. That's a very common use. The next is SMS text message. So we allow you to send a text message to your end users or your guest users with their credentials. An additional thing that we have in ISE in terms of a guest solution is our API. So we have the ability to integrate with ISE using a REST API to do additional print-offs or badges or things like that for your guest users. We'll also talk about and look at the portal in a few minutes here, and that portal is just, I'll show how we can easily customize the portal. So when we think about how we want users to connect, what we want that end user experience to be, it all starts with the portal, the splash page that they see when they connect. So as you see here on the slide, there's a couple of different things that you'll notice. Within ISE 2.1 and 2.0, 2.1, and 2.2, we've done a couple of things. One, we've made it very easy for you to configure guests by giving you a guest work center. Outside of the guest work center, we've also given you guest portals. And these portals are managed and held right within ISE, configured right within ISE, and customized within ISE. So you have the ability to do things like change your color schemes if you want. You have the ability to add images, to add logos, to create different texts that are going to be seen in the URL. We actually also have done something where we give you the ability to be able to see kind of a workflow before you actually push out the configuration changes. So as you make changes to your portal, you'll see what steps your users are going to go through and what that end user experience is going to be for them. On top of that, we've also given you the ability to see kind of a demo, if you will, or an example of what your portal pages are going to look like before you actually deploy that right from the ISE console. So if you don't have a device to test with, you still are able to see the portal pages, the splash pages that your end users are going to see as you're actually going through your configuration there. So with ISE, again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the PowerPoint, so I just want to make it clear and be sure that you all understand with ISE, we have a myriad of different ways that you can connect with guests. We have very customizable guest portals, and we'll be able to see that in the demo here in a few moments. So moving forward, I wanted to talk just on a few things that we see in ISE 2.2 that help with the guest access, that help with the wireless access. And the first thing is just the easy wireless setup. So what we've done is we've created a spot within the actual web interface of ISE that allows you to be able to configure. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can go back. There we go. We've created a space within the dashboard where you can easily set up your wireless access. This allows you to create all of your wireless configuration for your guests, your BYOD, your 82.1x, all within about 5 steps. It very easily pulls up a wizard for you to follow and streamlines that configuration, which makes deployment a lot easier. So we're talking about 5 steps where we're configuring the wireless LAN controller names, the IP address. We're looking at some of the email success pages and things that we want to configure, how we're going to notify the end users. We're looking at the wireless LAN, whatever wireless LAN we want to use, and redirect options that we have for the URLs after a user connects to the guest. We're looking at being able to add in your Active Directory environment and be able to use Active Directory for sponsors as well as other use cases within the wireless access for your 82.1x for your corporate users. And then, of course, the portal that I mentioned, being able to customize that portal. So within 5 steps in a few minutes, and I've actually seen it done, you're able to configure and stand up your ISE wireless, your ISE configuration, your wireless LAN controller configuration to support your guests, your BYOD, and your 82.1x ISE environment. So a couple of enhancements, things that are added that you won't see in the demo, specifically related to guests, is one, being able to have a single-click sponsor approval. So in the past, what you'll see in the demo is, well, we get a link, we click on the link, and we go to the sponsor portal to approve a guest user. Coming into that, too, is the single-click sponsor approval, where in the email, you'll have a link for approve and a link for deny. So instead of having to go to the sponsor portal, you'll have the ability to have that one click right there in the link sent to your email address. Another thing is the sponsor portal enhancements, the sponsor portal itself. So going to the sponsor portal, we've added a couple of things such as being able to have an auto time zone set, being able to reorder the table columns much like we do in the Radius Live logs, and then being able to search by phone numbers within the sponsor portal, and then even add or remove different parts of the dashboard or what we see in the columns there in the sponsor portal. So we're trying to continually make enhancements to the guest, to the sponsor portal, to the wireless environment as we hear what customers are asking for. So with all that being said, if there's no other questions that have come up during this, we can jump right into the web interface. I told you it would be a short PowerPoint and start taking a look at the actual demo. Are there any open questions that we need to answer before we get to the demo?
There was one that was, Robert, there was one that was asked that was answered in the Q&A, and it was, can guest provisioning be utilized against an existing SSID? And AJ had said, yes, once the controller is integrated with ISE, it certainly can. And there's another question that maybe you can address while you're moving over to your demo, and that is, what if you don't use ISE currently, but you have a guest anchor? Does this merge more easily? That was from Nick Moran. Thanks for your question, Nick.
Yeah, so the question is, if you have a guest anchor controller and you're not using ISE, but you want to deploy ISE, will it work well?
Yeah, I think the question is more like, is it easier if you have an anchor? Or, excuse me, what if you don't have an anchor?
If you don't have an anchor, okay.
Yeah.
So I won't say it's easier. I would say there's some subtle differences, but not any huge difference. So if you have an anchor controller, or if you don't have an anchor controller, as long as the controller that is processing that traffic is joined to ISE, and ISE knows the controller knows ISE, then the deployment should be fairly seamless.
Can I add one comment here? This is AJ. I think if I understood the question correctly from Nick, the whole kind of design aspect of a guest anchor is to drop that guest traffic off securely in the DMZ. So if you want to introduce ISE into that type of environment, essentially you are doing the same thing you would for a deployment without a guest anchor. It's the same wireless.
Yeah. Good. Thanks.
So it doesn't change much.
Yep. Okay. All righty. So if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and jump into the demo. What you're going to see here, this is ISE 2.0. ISE 2.1 has been released and is out. The GUI looks slightly different, but for the demo environment, we're using ISE 2.0. So you're going to see ISE here. We'll look at the live logs in the background. So you'll be able to see in real time what's happening as the iPad that we're going to also be taking a look at is trying to connect. So for the guest flow that we're going to start off with is, again, we're going to have a guest user that comes in with their iPad. They want to connect to our environment. They connect. They create an account, self-register their own account. Once they do that, their credentials are sent to a sponsor. The sponsor gets an email saying, hey, this guest user is trying to connect. The sponsor is going to approve that user, and then the user is going to be sent a text message or an email with their credentials to their email address. We'll do that flow first, and then we'll break there, answer any questions we have, and then jump into the BYOD portion to show the BYOD functionality. So a guest user comes in. They open up their iPad. Of course, they're trying to connect to the Wi-Fi. So they see the guest SSID. They're going to log in here to the guest SSID, and once we connect there, what's going to happen is we're going to automatically be able to go to our browser. Once we open our browser, we can browse to yahoo.com or just try to connect to whatever corporate website or business website we're at the time. What ISE is going to do is ISE is going to say, hey, I don't know this device. It's not in my Active Directory. It's not in my internal store, and they're connecting to my guest SSID. So I'm going to automatically forward this user to my guest portal. The guest portal that you see here is completely customizable. Again, like I showed you in the PowerPoint slide, everything from the color schemes, the words, the verbiage, everything you see here is pretty much customizable. Now, as a guest user, I don't already have an account, So I'm going to zoom in here, and we'll see the do not have an account option. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that do not have an account, and then I'll be prompted to enter my information. Now, the beautiful thing about this is whatever information you want to request, you have the ability to customize this list. So you can ask for their name, their phone number, their email address, their social security number if you would like it, what's their favorite color. You have the flexibility there. So I'm going to put in my information, and I'll use my information here for time's sake. I'll use the guest email address. So we're going to do guest-dcloud@dcloud.cisco.com. And typically what I'll do here is I'll ask for a phone number, for anybody's phone number. I'm going to use mine for the sake of time. But what we'll see here is I'm going to put in my phone number. Uh-oh, sorry about that. One. All right, so once you put in the phone number and click register here, what's going to happen is this request is going to be sent to the sponsor. So we'll jump over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Outlook, and you'll see that in Outlook, I'll log into the sponsor email address. Once I get there, I'll see a request, a guest approval request. So we see that Robert Roulhac is trying to join the guest. Again, in 2.2, this is where you would see the approve or deny and just have one click there to get to it. For the sake of the demo, I'm wanting to show you the sponsor portal. We're going to go directly into the sponsor portal. So I'll log in here. Sponsor can be anyone that you want it to be within your environment, as long as they have an Active Directory account, or they don't have to have an Active Directory account. They can have an internal account within ISE, but if they do, they can use their Active Directory credentials to log in. And once they do that, we'll come to the sponsor portal. Now, there's a couple of things that you'll see in the sponsor portal. You have the ability to create a known guest user if you wanted to define the duration of that account, the time and the date that you want that account to start, and the time and date that you want that account to end. You can also create random accounts. So if you wanted to just say, we want to create 50 accounts, or we'll just say 5. We're going to use the username prefix of wireless, and you can assign a group tag if you want. Again, define the day and time. You click create, and now those random accounts have been created with the prefix that you chose and a predetermined password. You can also import accounts if you wanted to. You can import bulk accounts and download the template, fill out the template, and import those bulk accounts if that's your desire there. So now we're going to go to pending accounts, because this is where the request will come in. And we'll see that Robert Roulhac is pending approval. So we're going to approve Robert Roulhac because we think he's a pretty okay guy. We'll let him in for today. Once we approve, 2 things are going to happen. Robert Roulhac is going to get an email with his credentials. He's also going to get a text message. So you may have heard the text message just come in on my cell phone here, and that text message just reads, hello, Rob, your account details. So it gives me my username and my password. So I can go back over to my iPad here, and I can type in my username, and then I can also type in my password. Now, the password that it gives me is a 4-letter password, but you have the ability to determine what you want your password criteria to be. So you can have a long password, short password, or whatever, however you would like to customize that there. So once you put in the password, I'm going to click sign on here. And now we get forwarded to the acceptable use policy. Again, the UP is something that you can have or you cannot have in there. That's customizable as well. I'm going to accept the acceptable use policy, and now we see I have a success. So as a guest user, I'm going to go back out now, and I'm going to try to reconnect to that corporate page that I was trying to connect to. Once I get to that corporate page, which now we see we don't get redirected, I have access to, I'm going to click on the portion of the page that says for customers or guests. We see I have no problem accessing that link. I can go back to the home page, and there's another tab that says for corporate employees. As a guest user, I'm curious, so I'm going to click on that tab and try to go there. What we're going to see here is because I'm a guest user and I only have guest access, I've been given access but I've been given segmented access where I can only see what's allowed for me to see with the guest environment. So as we come here, we'll see in ISE in the live logs that first I did a MAB authentication attempt. I got the guest redirect. I entered my credentials. I was approved. ISE learned that I was an Apple iPad, and then I was given the guest access authorization profile. So that allowed me to get the guest access and get limited guest access that segments me from the corporate environment. Any questions open in the chat about the guest flow there?
Yep, a couple of them. In fact, several, but one that I thought was interesting. You had some SMS integration, which was kind of cool. Can you discuss that really quick? Talk about how that happens.
Yeah, so it does require an SMS gateway, and that's just an additional piece of how we set that up, because ICE needs to make sure that it can get to the different cellular vendors out there and send that text message. But pretty much the way it happens is ICE gets that number, it works with the SMS gateway and says, I want to send this message, a predetermined message or a customized message that you want to put together out to this number, and then it sends the text message there. So two things that you need to have configured is, one, in ICE, you need to have it set up to be able to say that you want to send an SMS response. And then two, you have to have an SMS gateway configured. And we have plenty of documentation out there that's public and available for how to set up an SMS gateway within ICE. Any other questions there?
I'm just going through a couple of them. There's many of the questions are kind of in the process of being answered. So tell you what, if there's a couple that are not answered along the way, then we'll come back to them. Thanks for stopping for a sec.
All right, great. So what we'll do now is we're going to go to the BYOD flow. And the BYOD flow is simply what the flow would look like if we have an employee that's bringing in their personal device. They want to connect to the environment, but they want to get some sort of corporate access. They want to log in and work from their own device, or at least get access to some resources on their corporate device. Now, typically, we wouldn't allow that to happen. We wouldn't want that to happen because there's no way to determine what they have access to or what they don't have access to. With the BYOD flow, we're able to give them access, but then also give them segmented access to make sure they only have access to what we want them to have access to on that corporate device. So a couple of things that I'm going to do before we do that is I'm going to go in here to the identities and just show how we can remove a device or manage our devices. So we see here we have a list of devices, and we see here the pie chart that tells us that what types of devices we have. So I can click here on this pie chart, and this pie chart is actually going to adjust the table down here below. And when it adjusts that table, it only is going to show me the Apple iPad. So I can come here and see that this Apple iPad was registered to Robert Roulhac as a guest user. And if Robert Roulhac is misbehaving, I can come in here and say I want to delete Robert Roulhac from the environment, or that particular device from the environment. We see the tables adjusted. We click refresh here, and then we'll have all of our devices. One other thing I'll do is I'm going to come over here, and this is the wireless LAN controller. I'm just going to go in and remove the iPad from the wireless LAN controller so that we can come in as a brand new device with our BYOD flow. All righty. So, again, what we're going to do now is we're going to jump over to our iPad. A guest user or employee brings their iPad in. They go to the settings here. They're going to connect to the guest network because they want to get access. Once they do that, they go to Safari, and now they try to access the corporate web page. What we're going to see again is ICE is going to say, hey, I don't know this device. You're not in my Active Directory, so I want you to log in. I'm going to forward you to my guest portal to log in. From here, instead of creating an account, I already have credentials. So as an employee, I'm just going to input my employee credentials here. And this can be, again, the Active Directory account credentials that they have. We'll click go here. We get forwarded to an acceptable use policy. I accept. And now what ICE says is, hey, although I don't know the device, I do know that user. So this is an employee trying to use their own personal device. So ICE redirects them to the BYOD portal. So we'll start the BYOD flow where I can come in here and give it a device name. I can also go in and give it a description. And what we're going to do is ICE is going to allow us to register this device. So I'm an employee that's registering my device. I'm going to launch a profile, and that profile is actually going to be a ICE using the Apple supplicant provisioning to push a profile down to the iPad. And what's happening is ICE is generating a ETLS certificate. That ETLS certificate is going to be bundled in a profile after it's registered in ICE, and then ICE is going to push that down to the iPad. There's a couple of reasons why we do this. One, because as an employee bringing in their own personal device, we want them to connect the way we are forcing them to connect. This allows us to manage the connectivity of that device. So if an employee transitions for some reason, then we're able to revoke that certificate, which would then prevent that particular employee from being able to access the environment, which I'll demonstrate here in a second. So once we click done there, it should have launched that profile. Let's see if it launched there. Okay. Okay, so I think we're good to go. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why we got that error there. So as an employee now, we'll test it to see. I can now try to reconnect to that corporate, and it redirects me here. So let me check something in ICE. It's actually a good example because I can actually go in and see. One other thing that I'll show you in ICE is you have the ability to adjust the columns here. So within adjusting these columns, you have the ability to determine what you want to see and what you don't want to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and see the authentication method that this particular device is trying to use, because then it's going to allow me to know whether we're using the PAP-ASCII or if we're using the ETLS, which is what we should be using. So we're not interested in the device port or the posture status of the server, but we are interested in the failure reason, off method, and the authentication protocol there. So I'm going to click Save. I'll scroll over here. Now we'll see, right now it looks like we're still doing MAB. So let's jump back over to the iPad and let's see if we get connected to that corporate connection center. Okay, so we did get connected, and now we can jump back over to ICE and just make sure that we got connected as a registered device, which we did. And I'm going to scroll over and show you here now that as a registered device, we use the ETLS.1x and ETLS certificate that was assigned and pushed out to the actual endpoint. So I'm not sure why we got the error there on the iPad, but we see that we did get the .1x, we did get the ETLS certificate, and that's what we're using to register. Now, the beautiful thing is, going back over to the iPad, just like the guest user, the guest user was able to get to the public resources. So as an employee, of course, we are able to as well. Now I'm going to click on the For Corporate Employees tab, and as before with the guest user, we didn't have access. We see that we do have access now as an employee. One of the things that I'll point out is if you look at the bottom of this, you see the tab for financial records and insurance records. Well, this is available for authorized managers only. I logged in as an employee, so what we'll see here is as I try to click on that link and connect, I'm not going to be able to get access because even as an employee using my own personal device, I've been given limited access, segmented access into the environment. So that's the beauty of being able to do the ETLS certificate, be able to push a profile, and then within ICE with our policies, be able to provide access to employees to use their own personal devices, but be given segmented access. Now, one other thing that I'll show you, let's say that this employee goes out to lunch, takes their iPad out to lunch because they want to watch some training videos while they're on lunch. Then they come back in and they realize they don't have their iPad. So they think they left the iPad at the restaurant and the iPad may be stolen. As an employee, I can come into what we call our My Devices portal, and this allows me to manage my devices that I've onboarded. So I can go in here and look and see my iPad, and if I've lost it and I'm not sure where it is, I can mark this device as lost or stolen. So I'm going to come in here on the iPad. I'm going to mark it as lost. And you'll see here that it says in the message it takes about 2 minutes for ICE to recognize the device has been marked as lost. But what we're going to see is it doesn't quite take 2 minutes. We're going to jump back over to ICE here, and I'm going to refresh. And we see that this device has already, because the user marked it as lost, that device has been blacklisted. So what happens is we suspended that ETLS certificate so that the device would not be able to connect to our environment. So let's say that somebody came in and they had the iPad, they tried to break it or jailbreak it, and they brought it back in, and now they want to try to connect to our environment. We try to connect to that corporate page. What's going to happen is ICE is going to say, hey, wait a minute, I know this device has been marked as stolen, so it's going to update the whomever is trying to use it and say, hey, this device is identified as lost or stolen and cannot have access to this network. So this is the way that with employee's personal device, we can still make sure we protect our corporate environment by using the ETLS certificate and management there.
Robert, related question. Sorry to interrupt. Related question. Maybe this is exactly where you're about to go. But what if I want to revoke a user's BYOD device that's accessing the network? Could it happen when the employee leaves and the HR process begins and their Active Directory account is disabled? Would ICE reference that AD account and revoke the certificates?
So by default, there is, from what I've seen, there's not a direct configuration where if a user is deleted or account deleted from Active Directory, the ETLS certificate is automatically revoked. You may be able to use an API to do that, a REST API, but by default within the configuration, there's not a way to say if this user is deleted from Active Directory, then revoke their certificate. That's a great question, though, and a great use case. So I'll actually take that to the BU and see what they think of that, and if there's a way to do it, and if not, see if that could be a feature that we add in the future. Agreed.
But if the account in Active Directory is deleted, it wouldn't matter necessarily if they have a certificate because they still couldn't be authorized. Is that true?
If the account is deleted from Active Directory, the certificate relies on ICE. It relies on ICE. So if that certificate in ICE is not revoked, then via ETLS authentication, they may still be able to connect.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So the last thing that I'll show you here is, let's say that employee went back down to their car and said, wait a second, my iPad was actually underneath the seat. I found it. The employee can come in and reinstate that device. And as we'll see, once that device is reinstated by the employee, we can come back here and ICE will refresh. And what we're going to see is that device is actually going to be automatically re-registered. ICE is going to reinstate that certificate, and now the device is authenticated again via ETLS and should have access to the network. So we can come in here. That employee now takes their device and tries to connect to the Corporate Connection Center. They get access, and the beautiful thing is they get access, and they've been given the same exact access as they had before. They have access to the things they're supposed to, and when they try to connect to links or go to places within the environment that they can't, they're actually blocked and they don't have access. Any additional on the BYOD flow? Okay. Well, I would say at this point, let's open it up for any questions about ICE, about guests, about BYOD that anybody may have.
All right. Well, so there are a couple of questions that have been in the Q&A, but I'd like to make an announcement to everybody. If you're in a noisy area, please do mute your phone. I'm going to actually unmute everyone. I think we still have a few dozen people that are actually four dozen. So this might not work, but everybody, I'm going to unmute everybody. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them directly. Everyone is unmuted.
And the storm begins.
Yeah, right?
Hey, I have a question.
Yep.
So how did you mention limiting access for BYOD devices and only allowing them certain resources? How do you accomplish that?
Great question. So we accomplish that within our policies. So within ICE, we have what we call our policy set. And in every policy set, I'll show you the guest access. Actually, let's show the employee access, which is where the BYOD policy is configured. Within our authorization policies, which is what you're seeing here, we're able to look at the device, again, how I mentioned before, the context. So we learn the conditions of the device, who the device is, what type of device, what SSID are they connecting to, is it in Active Directory, is it a registered device, so on and so forth. And based on what we learn about it, we give what we call our permissions. So these permissions are the authorization profiles that we send to the wireless LAN controller to determine what the wireless LAN controller should give a user access to. So we see within the BYOD for the employees, there's Tier 1 access and Tier 2 access. So I'm just going to click here and look at the Tier 1 access, and you'll see within the Tier 1 wireless access, we give an access accept, but we also assign an aerospace ACL, which is Tier 1 access. And that ACL is what we're using in this scenario to limit the BYOD users to access some things and not to be able to access others. Now, there's another way that you can do this. Instead of using an ACL, we have the ability now with TrustSec to be able to apply security group tags. We can apply VLANs. We can apply, from a wire perspective, we can be able to the network access device there. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it, but this is how we will accomplish it. In authorization profile, we'll assign a profile that limits access via access list, security group tag, security group ACL, or VLAN. Does that answer your question there?
Thank you. No, perfect. Thank you. Because currently we use ACLs, but I was hoping for something like TrustSec, like you were talking about, and I think that's where I'm going with it next. Thank you.
Great. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about if there's a guest that's authenticating and you're allowing 443, could the guest conceivably hit the web interface for ICE?
You said if a guest is trying to authenticate and we're allowing 443, could they conceivably hit the interface of ICE?
Right. So the ACL, or assuming you have the ACL, you have to allow either 80 or probably just 443 to ICE for the authentication to flow. Is there any instance where a client could bring up the ICE web interface and hammer away at it?
So technically and theoretically, yes. They could just send a thunderstorm of authentication request to ICE. The reality is within our wireless LAN controller, I'll show you what we have configured in terms of our ACLs. So when we look at our access control list, there's a couple of different access control lists we have, right? So we have a guest ACL, and that guest ACL really is very, very limiting. As you see, they do have access to the IP address of ICE. So theoretically, yes, they could do that, but there's a few mechanisms within ICE that would prevent that from continuing to happen. We have the ability to detect a misconfigured supplicant, is what we call it. So when that supplicant hits a certain number, and I don't remember what the actual numbers are, but after a certain number of failed authentication attempts, ICE is going to black hole that supplicant, which means it's not going to even accept or try to process any authentication request from that supplicant. So you would have to send a significant amount of traffic from that supplicant to the internal IP address of ICE in order to shut it down, if you will.
And is that native in ICE, or is that with the addition of the black hole ACL?
No, that's natively within ICE. ICE will learn a misconfigured supplicant and then stop listening to it, basically.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Last chance for verbal questions for Robert. Anybody else have a good question?
Well, I have one. I don't know if it's good, but I'll give it a shot.
Do it. Yeah.
All right. So is using the profiling and all the ACLs and everything like that, does that lend itself to a scenario where we can have one SSID and then sort of filter down access as somebody goes through? Have you seen that used in businesses?
So that's actually a really great question. In most deployments, I've seen a separate SSID being used for guest versus corporate. There's a couple of different reasons for that. One, if everybody that comes into the organization is hitting the same ACL, yes, you can do some segmentation, but it could be potentially a worse experience for the guest users. So I think the way I've seen it typically configured is multiple SSIDs. If you wanted to configure just one SSID, then you would have to get very, very granular in terms of the ACL that you apply to specific users, and you'd have to match on other criteria within your policy. So I'll show you what I mean by that. And looking at the policy set, within the guest access, the simple way to set it up is we've said, hey, if you're using wireless MAV and you connect it to the dCloud hotspot SSID, then give them the hotspot redirect, which allows them to put in the code and get access to the internet. If you're using wireless MAV and you connect it to the dCloud guest SSID, give them the guest redirect. So this makes it very simple and very easy on the eyes in terms of understanding what users are connecting to and then what permissions they get. If you didn't have those SSIDs, then you would have to do more filtering like you see here on the employee list, where we're looking at not just MAV 802.1x and SSID, but are they in Active Directory? What type of device is it? Is it an Android device or is it an iPad device? Is the device registered in NDM? You would have to get way more granular within your conditions policies in order to make just one SSID work. Another thing is another reason why a lot of people use multiple SSIDs is because their corporate SSID, most of the time, they want to make sure has some sort of security, 802.1x security, or some sort of security on the SSID itself. So that was the difference in me connecting to the guest, registering as a device, and then as I reconnected with my iPad after I got my ETL and certificate, I was no longer on the guest SSID. I was actually on the internal SSID, and I may be able to show you that on the iPad, where I went from using that guest SSID that I initially connected to then using the dCloud registered SSID. I'm not sure my video is not showing. But anyway, that's kind of the difference, because if you use the one SSID and you would have to make it open for everybody, meaning no security on that SSID, and then do all of your security on the back end on ICE. By using separate, you can have a guest open SSID and then do your filtering and authorizations, and then have a secured SSID for your corporate access. That was a long answer. Sorry that was long. I hope that answers the question.
That was perfect. That is exactly what I was thinking. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. There was another question that came in to the Q&A panel. Is it a best practice to keep the SSIDs down to a minimum of a 3 to 4 range? Can you discuss best practices there?
Best practices. Best practices depend on the environment. That's my response to that. Do we have some standards? Yes, but everybody's environment is different. So when I hear the word best practice, it oftentimes
that was my word.
Yeah, it makes me kind of cringe. Now, I think practically, from a practical standpoint, the least amount of SSIDs you can have, the better. You could get away with just having 2 or 3 if you decided to do 3, 1 for BYOD, 1 for guests, and 1 for corporate employees. The beautiful thing is with our Cisco wireless infrastructure, depending on where your access points are, you don't have to broadcast every SSID on every access point. You can create access point groups and then only display guest SSIDs to those access points that are located in common areas where guests will be. Only display corporate SSIDs in other areas where access points are that your employees are going to be at. So you can, I would say, yes, 2 to 3, maybe 4. If you can't keep it down, it's better. But the reality is, with the technology that we have today with Cisco Wireless, you can have 100 SSIDs, and your users will still only be able to see 1 if you set it up correctly.
I think one thing to consider when we talk about SSIDs, there's a couple of things that are happening there that would eat up some valuable resources. It is a best practice to keep them down as low as possible. 3 to 4 is typically what we try to aim for, but every environment is different. Healthcare, you've got different challenges there. But just remember, each SSID requires management overhead of airtime. Each SSID requires the management frames to be sent at the lowest mandatory data rate, which eats up a lot of airtime for valuable client data interactions. So try to keep that to a minimum when possible.
Yeah, that was a great point. Thanks. From a wireless engineer, I'm a security guy, so I appreciate that.
No problem. I don't know how you got stuck with that question. but thanks for answering it.
Yeah. Probably have a big mouth.
Hey, so far it's spewing out wisdom. So, any other questions from the audience?
This is Daniel with the Rady Children's Hospital. I have a question. We are in a pilot stage with ISE 2.1, and we are about to go live, but we do have an outstanding issue with SSL redirection on our laptops. With iOS and Android devices, it's much easier because Captive Portal pretty much catches it. But I notice when I have my homepage on my web browser set to an HTTPS, the Captive Portal on Windows is not catching it. I was wondering, can this be fixed? And if so, is this done on the wireless controller or is this done on ISE?
Great question. There is an answer for that, but unfortunately I do not remember. In ISE 1.3, I believe we said that whatever URL that is the user is trying to browse to or that's set as the home can't be in HTTPS. I believe they've done some things to address that in 2.1 and 2.2, but I don't remember exactly what they've done. If you want to shoot me an email, I can follow up with you and do some research and figure out if that's still the case, where you can't use HTTPS for the redirects, or if they've found a way to get around that. And if there's anybody else within the panelists that knows that answer, feel free to jump in as well. But let me give you my email address. It's rroulhac@cisco.com. rroulhac@cisco.com. If we don't get an answer on the call, I'll touch base with the BU and figure out what our official response is for that one.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Great question. Any other questions? Well, if you guys are anything like me, what'll happen is you'll hang up the phone and think of probably 2 other questions that would have made sense to answer or ask verbally here. And if that happens, please feel free to just hit reply to one of the email messages that I had sent over, or just reach out to your Cisco Enterprise Networking Specialist or your account team, and they'll get you in touch with one of us. Thank you for taking time today, and happy Wireless Friday, and I hope everyone has a really great weekend.